At this point, if you've managed to keep track, Hong Kong has had its 21st straight weekend of anti-government protests. Police made more arrests and lobbed tear gas canisters at crowds, and once again, protesters flung Molotov cocktails. Clashes took place in pockets around the city. It doesn't look like either side moved the needle much. Crowds did turn out, but in fewer numbers, not like the hundreds of thousands, even millions of protesters we've seen in the past. So is the movement losing momentum? Joining us is journalist Holmes Chan of Hong Kong Free Press, who'll have some answers. Holmes, weekend after weekend, we've seen the protesters demanding things. Here are the things they demand. They want to make sure that there's an independent investigation into police brutality. They want to make sure that the protests themselves are not labeled riots, and they want to make sure that protesters detained are let go. They also, of course, want the leader of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, to step down, paving the way for universal suffrage. You were there this weekend. Are we seeing any progress?
So over this past weekend, Hong Kong has entered into a cycle of protests again, which started with street marches, which escalated into clashes between protesters and police. So we are at this stage where it's almost at a deadlock or a gridlock between two factions, neither of which want to back down. And we saw police have even stepped up their law enforcement tactics, for example, targeting rallies before they even begin. And this has led to a large number of arrests, over 200 arrests in the past week. So the stance of the government so far seems to be they are unwilling to back down, and they have given all the concessions that they can, is what they're saying. Earlier this month, it has been announced that the extradition bill has been formally withdrawn. That is 1 out of 5 of the core demands of the protesters. But since the other things involve democratic reform, for example, the government has shown no sign at all that it's willing to even listen to the protesters or even having changes, incremental changes on that front.
Now, we also are reading reports that journalists have been targeted this weekend. Tell us more.
In fact, it is not the first time that Hong Kong police has targeted journalists. There have been very blatant cases of police directing pepper spray or tear gas or even water cannons at journalists who are clearly wearing, for example, their reflective vests. They're showing their credentials, but nevertheless, they get treated this way. One recent complication is that Hong Kong passed an emergency law to ban the use of masks, which that would also include gas masks or respirators so that people can breathe and remain unaffected by tear gas. Now, the government has promised that journalists should be able to wear gas masks when they're doing their jobs. But over this past weekend, there are incidents of police officers pulling off the mask from the face of journalists, despite that they are journalists and they're in an environment where there's tear gas. So that has led to condemnation by 3 of the largest press organizations in Hong Kong, saying that this has very troubling implications about press freedom.
Now, Holmes, tell us what's on the horizon. I understand in the next few weeks there will be local elections. Is that what people are focused on right now?
Well, the local elections are for the district council, so a relatively community-level election. It is not a major decision-making body or doesn't have a lot of political power. Nevertheless, the pro-democracy side is expected to have large gains in the next election, partly due to how the pro-Beijing side have lost favor with the public. Now, there has been a lot of doubt as to whether there are the disqualifications affecting these elections, especially because there are pro-democracy candidates which have been disqualified in previous elections. Now, so far, we haven't seen that yet, and most of the candidates, even those who have very progressive views, they seem to have entered into the race okay. However, the only remaining case is Joshua Wong. As most viewers would probably know, Joshua Wong is one of the most prominent pro-democracy activists, and his campaign so far has not been given the green light by the government.
Holmes Chan, thank you.
Thank you.